Do you want to give me a high level overview of your life, like story? Like, where were you born?
No.
Where were you born?
I was born in San Francisco, California.
Okay. What were your parents like?
What were they like?
Yeah.
They were wonderful.
Tell me about Grandma O.
Grandma O was a story in herself. She was special. You know, you meet people and you form opinions. She was special from day one right on through. So,
What was her personality? I've heard the stories, but what was her personality like?
very outgoing, very responsive, and very nice. Wonderful lady.
What was her saying? Over heaven.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
That's all I've heard.
Right.
I don't remember.
That was a favorite line.
Why did she say that?
Whenever she heard something surprising, it would be, oh, for heaven's sake.
That's really cool. That's fine. And what was your dad like, Grandpa?
Very serious, very good, and I respected him an immense amount.
Do you have a first memory with them that you can think of?
Running across the playground at Kennedy Silverton Grade School. From him, not to him.
What'd you do?
I get into trouble for something, and then I added back talking to it, and that was belt time.
Who was worse, you or your brother?
Well, he was 4 years older, so it was different times. My dad was older, my mom was older, he was older, so different times. Plus, by the time I got to a point where I really understood him or what was going on, he was on his way to the Navy. So there were 4 years there where he was gone.
I didn't realize he was in the Navy.
Yep.
Was he in during the war?
No, he was during the period before the Korean War, and I was during the period right at the Korean War, before the Korean War.
Because you didn't have to go, right?
Nope.
The Korean War?
Nope.
Dang, that's crazy.
I was lucky I didn't have to go, but I would have. I'll go today. I'm ready.
I bet you will. You're at World War III, Doug Owens.
I'm ready.
Coming in hot.
I may not function too well, but I'm ready.
Hey, they got robots now. You can control them.
That's true.
Okay, so you grew up. When did you move to Ohio?
I was a whole 5 years old when we lived here in Cincinnati. So my dad was transferred, and
What did he do?
he was a vice president with Baldwin Piano Company.
Oh yeah, that's crazy.
Yep.
Did he play or no?
No.
Okay.
No. My mom did.
Okay.
He didn't.
Was Grandma O? Was she good?
No, but she liked it. She had a grand piano, and she liked it, and she enjoyed it. So.
The piano. Did you guys have that? Was that piano from?
Mm-hmm.
I never knew that.
That piano was actually made for the chairman of the board of Baldwin Piano Company. It was the only piano ever made out of a wood called fruit wood.
Okay.
And unless you're in the music business, you wouldn't know what that is. But it's a very special type of wood, and this grand piano was made out of that. And then when the president of the company passed away, my mom and dad bought it from his family to keep in our family. And we kept it as long as we could, but then we couldn't keep it all the way. So,
Yeah. I remember playing it. You would get mad.
baby grand piano, right?
We would hit on it, and you'd be like, "Hey."
Right. That was not a toy.
That makes sense now.
Not a toy.
A very expensive
Not a
toy. No, that's funny. So you grew up, you moved to Cincinnati, then you started working at Kroger.
When I was in high school, I worked at Kroger, and it was right there by the Kennedy Silverton's grade school, and it was run by one man and about 4 clerks. And it was small, real small Kroger store, and it was a wonderful work experience. Stocked shelves, carried out groceries, did all the things you would think go along with that. And he was a he was a good guy. His name was Herman, and he was a good guy. So I enjoyed it.
That's cool. That's funny. Did you ever did you get promoted there? Did you keep working there through high school?
Well, you didn't get promoted. You started out stocking shelves, and then you started carrying groceries out, and then you started delivering some groceries. But I worked before Kroger. I actually worked in a little corner grocery store, and actually started delivering some some groceries. The guy had a I think it was a 56 Ford two-door that he used. He had friends who lived in Western Hills, so his store was in Kennedy Heights. So it was about a 40-minute drive to get to Western Hills. And I would take his little Ford and drive bags or packages or cartons full of groceries to Western Hills. And I remember it vividly because it was a two-door, so you had to get everything into the back somehow. Mm-hmm. And then this car was standard shift. And when I got the job, I had never driven a standard shift. So he said, "Can you drive a standard shift?" And oh, sure, I can drive a standard shift. Of course I can. So I learned how to drive it. He was right on Montgomery Road, right on the hillside. And there was a street that went down below the store. And I learned by popping the clutch to get it started. And then standard shift, I learned by driving that car back and forth to Western Hills.
That's pretty funny.
Yep.
So you go through school, you go through high school. What were you like in high school? Were you the nerdy kid? Were you the cool
No,
kid?
I was an outgoing kid. I was a little bit that close to trouble all the time.
Right on the edge. Did you
Right
play
on the
sports
edge.
and stuff?
I wasn't a big sports guy. I played baseball, and I played gymnastics in high school, but I didn't play any major baseball or anything like that. And we played a lot of Little League baseball, softball, so it was enjoyable.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I read in here that you wanted to be, when you were younger, your dream job was to be on the Reds, but you didn't
Not
have the
practical.
skills.
Not practical. Not
You
practical.
didn't have the talent.
The phone never rang.
That's okay. You're not doing too hot anyway.
That's when the phone never rang.
That's all right. I think you did all right without him. So you finished high school and then college. Were you thinking about going to different schools, or were you?
No, when I finished high school, I was just so happy to graduate. And then I decided, oops, I want to go to college. And then I realized what my grades were, and I realized, how am I going to do this? So at that point in time, you could still get into Miami University, which is where I submitted an application, got accepted, but I didn't have the grades, and I didn't have the experience of the courses either. I remember when I went to Miami, the first thing I realized when I picked up the book was it said, assuming you've had da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, we will continue on from here. And you went through that same experience, and most people do. And I remember I got back from that first weekend of orientation, and I got in my car and I drove from Oxford to Woodward High School, and I went in and bought my senior school books from Woodward because I didn't have the assuming you've had. I had to go back, and I spent that summer learning those books because I didn't have them. Because I had spent my summer doing this and doing that and never having time to work,
What was
or
you
never
doing?
having time to do what
What
I
was you
wanted.
doing this summer?
Playing baseball or in the woods or whatever, or chasing girls or whatever.
That's really funny.
You remember those days.
Oh, yeah. So you finally got all your stuff figured out. Did you go to Miami first?
Went to Miami University first for the first semester because I decided one of the ways that I could really help myself was if I got into the OCS program, officer training school program at Oxford. So I went there and joined the Navy ROTC and started in that program there. And then I was there for about 7 months. And I had a girlfriend that lived here. And of course, I was trying to operate out of Oxford, carry on with a girlfriend here. And then I realized this is really tough. And then I found out that I could join ROTC at Oxford, but go to the University of Cincinnati. So I transferred. And several classmates of mine from Miami who were in Phi Kappa Tau fraternity, we transferred to UC. And I wanted it because of the NROTC program, plus also the education opportunities. So went to UC and lived at home, and that's how I went through college.
Dang. Did you pay your way through, or did you?
Yep. I worked my way through.
Where'd you work?
At Baldwin Piano Company and at Kroger and at a gas station, and I worked every minute I could work because I paid every single penny of my college education.
Dang. That's good. Good for you.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And my dad could have paid it, but he knew I should never ask him for it. Mm-hmm. So I had to go earn it. So that's what I did.
That's crazy.
Yep.
And then, what'd you do at Baldwin? Were you just like sweeping floors?
No.
Were you salesman, sales rep? Or?
No, I started out working in the mailroom. And that's where you got to meet every person that worked there. Mm-hmm. Senior vice president to a guy in the factory. I learned how to get along with all those people. And it was a great situation. My dad was highly respected. But one of the things I was concerned about was, and the vice president who I worked for, Jim Mixter, kept telling me, you're going to be a success. You're going to really do well. We're happy with you. You're really doing a great job. And I kept saying to myself, is it because my last name is Ollinger, or is it because my dad is a vice president? Is it me, or what is it? So finally I decided I have to find out. And so I went in one day to Mr. Mixter's office and had an appointment and sat down, and he said, what can I do for you? And I said, I'm going to leave Baldwin Piano Company. He said, you're what? Are you kidding me? And I said, no. I said, I'm going to quit, and I'm going to go to work for Procter & Gamble. Why? And I said, because that's the best selling and business opportunity that I can find, and so I want to go to work there. He said, what did they offer you? He said, well, beat it. And I said, no, I'm sorry. He said, what did they offer you? And I said, I don't have a job yet. And he started laughing, and he said, well, I suggest your first thing might be to go get a job, offer before you quit to go take a job you don't have. So I said, you're probably right, but I'm going to go down and get an interview, and I'm going to get a job. So I went down the next Monday to P&G, walked in the front door and went in the lobby at the general office downtown and introduced myself and sat down. And the gal said, well, why are you here? And I said, I'm here to get a job with Procter & Gamble. She said, well, we're not hiring anybody right now. And she said, what do you want to be? What do you want to do when you're here? And I said, I want to sell. I want to operate general management and selling. And she said, well, hang on a minute. So she left, came back about 30 minutes later, and she said, well, we're not really hiring anybody. She said, but if you'd like, I'll take your information, and we can get back to you if we have an opportunity. And I said, okay, fine. So she gave me the information. I wrote it all out, sat there the rest of the day, and at the end of the day, when she left, I left. The next morning when she came in, I was sitting in the waiting room there, and she said, well, I already told you we don't have a job. And I said, I understand, but I'm going to sit here until somebody talks to me and gets me a job. So I sat there for 2 more days, and finally a gentleman came out who she went and talked into coming to talk to me, named Mike Gray. Mike Gray was the district manager for Procter & Gamble for the area here, including Cincinnati. And he came out and he sat down with me and he said, we're not hiring anybody. And I said, I understand. They've already told me that, but I'm going to stay here until somebody tells me why you can't hire me, because I've got a great opportunity and I'll work hard and I'll do really well. So he said, well, I'll tell you what, here, I want some more information. So he gave me another thing to make out, which I did. Took my college background and all the courses and everything. And he said, let me do some checking and I'll come back to you. Okay. So I guess a week went by and I called him and I said, haven't heard from you. And I know you really want me to go to work there. So when am I going to hear from you? He said, well, we're working on it. Let's get through this. I'll get back to you. So the next Monday he called me and he said, I want you to come in for an interview. So I said, okay. So he was in the Gwen building, which is off of 6th Street downtown. That's where the sales offices were. And I went in and interviewed with him, and then I interviewed with one of the vice presidents. And he said, we'll get back to you. And I said, what does that mean? I said, I really want to get this job because I've already resigned the other job. And I need a job because I've got a 1-year-old baby and a wife, and I need this job. Let us get through it. We'll get back to you. So they called another week or so later, and he said, I'll tell you what, we don't have an immediate opening. He said, but I'm going to make you a job offer to go to work for Procter & Gamble, but on our conditions, not on yours. And I said, that all depends. What are you offering me? He said, we're going to offer you a position in sales, and we can't tell you where, and we can't tell you when. But it'll be sometime over the next month, and you'll have to be willing to go wherever we tell you to go. And I said, well, okay. So I went home that night, filled out a bunch more paper, and talked to my wife, and I said, here's the deal. And she said, well, wait a minute. We're going to go somewhere we don't know where we're going to do what we don't know what we're going to do to get a job with Procter & Gamble. What kind of an opportunity is that? And I said, well, I want to try this. So it was about 3 weeks later, he called and he said, we're starting a new part of Procter & Gamble, which has always been in the soap business, the food business, but we're going into the paper business. And we want to offer you a position in sales starting in Cincinnati, and you'll be trained here, but within your first 30 days, you'll have to be willing to move wherever we tell you to move, when we tell you to move. I said, okay. So, of course, I went home again, and my wife said, well, I got to know where we're going. What are we doing? So another couple of days went by, and he called me, and he said, well, here's the first sales opportunity in the new paper division of Procter & Gamble is in Binghamton, New York. And you're going to have a sales territory there, and you're going to start out the paper business, which we've never been in. But we bought the old Charmin Paper Company, and you're going to learn that business, and you're going to be in sales with Procter & Gamble in Binghamton, New York. And I said, okay. He said, now, it's Friday, and you need to be at a meeting in Buffalo on Monday. And he said, we're going to give you a car here, which you can drive to Buffalo for the meeting. And after the meeting's over, which will be 3 days, you're going to need to drive to Binghamton and find a house to live in, or wherever you and your wife want to live. And she probably won't be able to go up there yet, so you'll have to go check it out, think of what you want to do, and then be willing to move right after that. And I said, okay. So I went home. That was a Friday. I went home Friday evening. She went through some tears of family being in Cincinnati all her life and da-da-da-da. But we decided we wanted to try it. We wanted to find out. So I guess it was Sunday when they called. And they said, we made a mistake. You're not going to Binghamton, New York. You're going to Syracuse, New York. And I said, why? Well, we think we have better opportunity in Syracuse for you. We want you to go to Syracuse, but you still have to be in Buffalo tomorrow morning. And so you're going to need to leave this afternoon and drive to Buffalo. He said, it'll take you about 8 hours, and go up there, and here's the hotel to check into. And you go down in the morning and you meet Mr. Tom Thumser. He's the district manager that'll be taking over for that area. And you'll interact with him, and you'll go find a place to live. You'll get transferred over, and you'll be on your way. And I said, okay. That's what I did. That's the way it all started. So
that's wild. And
11 moves later, we were all over the place.
It was you, Marty, and Bev
That's it.
driving that car.
Driving the company car, which happened to be a green Nash Rambler. It was the world's ugliest car I've ever seen.
Well, hey, let's go back to college real quick.
Yep.
When did you meet Bev? What was that like?
We met in college at UC. She was a transfer from nursing school in Hamilton, and I was in with my fraternity brothers in the student union, and we were having some conversations and talk, and of course people are going in and out of the student union all the time, and she came in with a couple of her girlfriends, and I said, who's that? And somebody said, oh, those girls just transferred from Hamilton Nursing School. And my fraternity brother said, don't even think about it because she won't talk to you. And I said, well, let me find out. So I went over and started talking to her, and she wasn't very friendly. And finally, we met, and then I started calling her, and that didn't work either. Then I asked her out. That didn't work either. And it took me 3 different times of trying to get her to agree to go out on a date. So that's how we started and met, and went on from there.
You're the ultimate salesman.
Well, no, you had to remember, Chris, and you've had a lot of things happen to you, but in those days, you went out and made things happen to you. Nobody handed it to you. You went out and got it. And thank God I had the benefit of learning through the Navy and through the NROTC program and all of that. I learned what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And it required me going out and getting it done. So that's what I did. And when I went to work for Procter & Gamble and made a couple of moves, got promoted a couple of times, and started managing people, I loved it. I just loved that. So I could instill in people the right kind of values and the right kinds of things to do and demonstrate how to do it. And I met some wonderful people who helped me all of my life. And so I was very fortunate. They thought they won, but I actually won because of their benefit and their help. That's
super cool.
Lucky.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Did you have anybody in particular that you kind of mentored at work that you
Quite a few.
are really proud of?
Quite a few. Yep, quite a few.
Any name come to mind?
Oh, Ted Crouch, Bill Blair, quite a few of them. In Canada especially, I had quite a few. That was a separate experience of 3+ years in a strange country, different customs. And as an example, just a small little story. One of the things you do in the States, if you have a product you want to sell, you have to learn what is allowed and what isn't allowed, because we operate here under a thing called the Robertson-Patman Act. And so you can't call your competitor and ask him a question. You're not allowed to do that. There are laws you have to follow, but in Canada they don't have the Robertson-Patman Act. So if you don't like something your competitor's doing, you can call them up. Whereas you couldn't do that here at all. So it was a different environment, different work experience,
Oh, yeah.
but a lot of learning out of it.
That's way different.
Yep.
That's really interesting. I didn't know there was like different business practices up there. Oh yeah, that's
And laws.
I was telling Chris the NASCAR
Yep.
thing. Was like thinking back on your
That all came out of finding another way to sell something more creatively. And when I got into the paper business and got in upstate New York, one of the things I realized was, like you guys, you have different things you really enjoy and like. And I quickly realized two of the loves that people had were country music and NASCAR racing. And so I started investigating it and started checking on it. And then I came up with the idea of trying to put together a sales program with our customers where we could convince the consumer to not only take things that they loved, but things that we sold and we loved, and put them together and create a love affair out of it that built a major business. So when I went to Canada, when I came here to the U.S., and I came back here, I started getting into NASCAR racing, and through a friend of mine, and then met a couple of the owners, and then as doing that, talking to people, I started realizing that where I was in charge at that point was the southern United States. And there were certain products in the South that didn't sell anywhere near that, anywhere else in the country. And the reason for that was NASCAR racing and country music. So when I got into the paper business and got into the Southern Division, we dreamed up the idea, a couple of guys I worked with and myself, trying to put together the two love affairs. And we met a woman, older woman, who ran a NASCAR racing program with a product that was designed to relieve your headaches. What do you think of when I say that?
Tylenol, Aleve.
Okay, well, the biggest selling pain reliever in the southern United States is a product that comes in a little package that looks like sugar, not like a pill, not like anything like that, and it's Gooding's headache powder. And you take this thing; it's the world's worst way to dispense a product, but it's like taking a package of sugar, tearing the top off of it, pouring it into a glass of water, and drink it. That's the way you take it. It's the number one selling headache relieving product, bigger than Bayer, bigger than any of them, from about Nashville all the way down and all the way east to west.
Dang.
So I got a chance to meet her, who was probably 70 when I met her, and was invited to go to one of the NASCAR races. And I ended up taking Bev, my wife, with me. And she met this woman. And, of course, she's never met anybody she didn't like and get along with. And so this woman was terrific with us. And she said, I really want to help you get this started. So I want to work with you in how we do this. And we came up with the idea of how to do it. And then we said we need to combine with it country music. And we went out and started doing some interviews with some of the country music people and ended up with a guy named T.G. Shepherd. And we started the Folgers Waking Up Southern commercial and product launch. And it took the product in 9 months from last as a product, coffee, to number one in the whole southern half of the United States. It was number one in 9 months. Nobody's ever done that before.
That's crazy.
And I loved it. I mean, it was fun. We had a great time. Took a lot of weekend time because you were going to a race or doing something, not doing your regular work. And so you'd do your regular work other times. But so it was productive. It was really good and very productive for me and my future as well. And then After that, the company said, we want you to have international experience. I said, I don't know what does that mean? And they said, we want you to go on an international assignment. And I said, well, what do you want? I said, I've got all these kids, and I've got family and my mom. So what are you talking about? We want you to move to Istanbul, Turkey. And I said, of course, you got to realize P&G stands for you listen and you go, okay? So, and you don't sit around for a week deciding or hearing what your new salary is or anything. That's where your job's going to be. You'll go. Well, I looked at that one and I said, I can't do it, because my mom is here by herself. The kids are gone pretty much, or starting to get married and having kids of their own, and I just can't do that. So I told them, I'm sorry, but I can't do that. So I waited about 6 months, I guess, and they came back again, which they never did. And they said, I'll tell you what, how about if we could get you an international assignment that was an 8-hour drive from Cincinnati? And I said, well, tell me more. And they said, we want you to go to Toronto, Canada, and we want you to get the paper business and the food and beverage business and the Hires root beer business. We want you to get all that business going and do what you do everywhere else. So I went up and met the president of the company and decided to go. And Bev went up and spent the weekend, and we had a great time, and we decided to go do it. For 3 years we did that. And by then you were in high school and pretty much on your own. So
That's crazy. That's wild.
That's it.
Thinking back to your wedding or your engagement, how did you propose to her?
Well, first you fall in love and you make your mind up that that's what you want to do. Because if you don't do it, you'll kill yourself if you don't get married. So why are you shaking your head?
No, I'm just laughing. I kind of agree with you. So, yeah.
So I decided that's what I wanted to do. So I went out and bought a ring, like most young men do. And I decided, well, most of my activity was always when I was driving somewhere or doing something, because I could think better then. So we were driving somewhere to go on a date to meet somebody. And at the corner of Kenwood and Montgomery, I was turning the corner and I said, we were talking about the future, and I said, I really do love you and I want to marry you. And will you marry me? She said, what? And I said, yeah. And I pulled the ring out right there in the car. And she didn't expect it at that point, going around a corner. So she, of course, said yes, and that's the start of that story.
That's cool. That's really neat.
Yep.
Then can you remember your wedding?
Yes.
How was it? What was it? Was that
Well, you got to remember,
fun?
in those days, weddings were low-budget affairs. They weren't $200,000 affairs, okay? They were low budget. So after we were engaged, we waited about 9 months and then went ahead and had the date and went ahead to the wedding. But it was in the parish that she belonged to, and I wasn't Catholic, so that was another change that we had to go through. And
what were you?
Pardon me, I was Protestant,
Oh,
so I was
What, Lutheran or
no Protestant,
Methodist, Protestant,
Presbyterian.
Presbyterian. Okay.
So after we were engaged, I said, I want to go meet your priest, who I did, and I've got a cold, so forgive me, but he said, what do you think about all this? And I said, I've got a couple of stories in my mind about the Catholic Church that I probably need to get straightened out in my mind. And he said, and we were just starting instruction at that point, and he said, what are they? And I said, well, first one is, somewhere in my mind I got this impression that when you get married, when a priest marries you, the priest gets to spend the first night with the bride. And this young guy was smart enough. He said, well, what do you think about that? And I said, I don't think about that. It isn't happening. So I said, well, I said, tell me where this came from. So he started laughing and he said, I've heard that myself, and there's not an ounce of truth to that anywhere in the history of the church that I can find. Okay, fine. So we got to know each other pretty well after that, the priest and I. And so he was our priest when we got married, great guy, and left the church about 6 months later because he found somebody he wanted to marry and ended up quitting the business of being a priest. So, but a wonderful guy. So
That's pretty funny.
that's how that all happened.
Do you remember the birth of your first?
Sure.
What was going through your brain?
Well, you got it. Well, again, different time. All right. So I didn't do the birth of the baby because at that time you didn't do that, and I'm not sure I could do it anyway. So when I went for the birth of Marty, I had my briefcase and I had a bunch of work that I had to do, and I went to the lobby and sat down, and that's where I stayed. And it was about 18 hours later when Marty came. But you sat there and you waited. That's what I did until somebody told you, congratulations, you know. And her mother was there also. Grandma Keithy was there. And so it was great. But that's how it all happened.
Yeah, that's cool. And you had a bunch of them, so.
A bunch of them,
You
right.
ended up being a pro.
Including your mother. Right.
How was she?
Pardon
How was
me?
she as a toddler? Was she
No different than most toddlers.
just super nice? Well, you said she was really kind and
Yep.
yeah, that's funny.
Laura was no problem when she was growing up because she would not she would not do anything out of the rules no matter what.
If you were to give one sentence for each kid when they were young, like Laura was not a problem.
Well, I had names for them.
Okay.
Like Laura was Wawa Pretty Face because that's who she was. She was a beautiful young lady, whether she was 6 or 16. Marty was trouble, no matter where he was trouble, because he was always testing the boundaries of what he could get away with. So that was a problem. And then each one had a different name.
Keep going, Brian? What was Brian?
Brian was number 12 because he always, whenever he played baseball or any sports, he asked for number 12. He was number so, and a lot of the names came from a neighbor we had across the street in Sharonville, who was single. He was not single. He was married, but his kids were all gone, and he would sit on his front porch, and he was a very outspoken guy. He was the sales manager for I can't remember the name of the company, but the one of the biscuit companies. So he would always bring cookies, always bringing cookies. And the kids loved him for those cookies.
What was Lisa's nickname? Do you remember?
Let me think. Lisa Bargisa. That was her name.
Wait,
Lisa
why?
Lisa Bargisa. And Bob and I think gave her that one together. Keith was trouble, always trouble.
Number 2, treble 2.
Trouble. And let's see, Brian, number 12. Who else am I missing here?
Lynn, but she was later, right? Did she have one, Lynn?
Lynn was special. That's who he called her, special. And she was a caboose. That's who we called her, the caboose.
What about Jeff?
Oh, Jeff was trouble. Jeff was always in trouble for something.
All the boys are troubles.
Always into something for trouble.
That's pretty funny.
Like Brian. I mean, Brian got into trouble too. Like one time at Muller, Brian had just was starting his first semester at Muller, and Brother Flaherty at Muller called at home and said, would you mind coming down here? So I said, why? Well, I think you want to see your son. I said, okay. So I got in the car and I drove down there. Went in, I said, well, to the girl that worked there, I said, where is he? Oh, Brother Flaherty's waiting for you in the bathroom. So I went into the bathroom, and they had him hanging over the toilet, throwing up. And he'd obviously had a bunch of beer, and this was his first second week, third week, first football game at Muller. And he said, I don't know how to tell you this, but you get a tuition at Muller for a price, and you get 2 penalties. The second one, you're out, and you don't get back in. And your son's already got 1, and he hasn't even started his first class yet. So he needs to understand he can't have a second one, or he'll be gone. He'll have to go somewhere else to school. So that's how Brian got through all of that period.
Sounds like trouble.
Fun, yep.
Do you remember, okay, Lynn was born, and then you guys were up in Canada.
Lynn was a caboose. That was the name for
Do
Lynn.
you guys remember, who was your first grandkid? Do you remember your first grandkid? Would it have been Jeff?
Yeah, it was, well, let's see. First grandchild was Marty's, I guess.
Jason?
Jason.
Or would it have been Brad?
No,
Brad.
it was Brad. That's who it was, Brad.
Do you remember that?
I do.
Jeff was pretty young, right?
I do, but again, I wasn't in the delivery room.
Oh, you weren't.
I didn't do that. I mean, you guys probably all do that, but I didn't do that.
No, it makes sense. Yeah.
Briefcase and sit and on my phone and work, and I would just sit there until somebody said, "Congratulations, it's a boy or girl or whatever."
Well, you would take your kids sometimes to work, right? You take them to fly, first class and stuff. My mom told me that.
Yep. Well, the airlines had a deal where if you were an elite business traveler, you could take your kids free with you on the airline. So at that time, I was flying first class everywhere. So I took a different one on a special trip, one trip somewhere, and brought them back. So in my case, I had the western half of the United States at that point, and Hawaii. So I would take them, and different strange things would happen that were funny, and they all remembered it, and I remembered them all. So it was great.
Well, that's cool. That's really neat. Yeah, I don't know. Looking back, any big life lessons? You're like, oh, this.
Well, the biggest life lesson I think I've learned over time is don't get too excited about anything. Kind of live each day in the best way you can. And then importantly, enjoy the people you work with and for, and use every talent they have to help you along the way. And if you do that right, good things will happen. That's the best advice.
That's really good advice.
I've never been a Phi Beta Kappa, but I've had great personal instincts, particularly when it comes to people. And if you've got people that work for you or with you that respect you and are willing to do the extra mile to help you, you'll do very well in whatever you do.
No, that's really good.
Yep.
Well, it sounds like one of the themes that you've had come up over and over is persistence. I feel like you are like one of the most persistent, stable,
Focused.
focused.
I am focused. I know what I want. I know how to get it, and I know what to do to get it, and I know what I need to do personally to make sure it happens. So I love encouraging people. I love building people, and I love making successes out of people. And to me, that's valuable.
That's really neat.
Yep.
No, I mean, it's great. Like, what, 6, 7 kids later and 18, 19 grandkids later?
Yeah, but you learn every time different lessons with each one. They're different. In the same way that you're different than your brothers and sisters, and you learn things that you need to know about people, and then you need to know how to do it. And I also think another thing that's really important, you need to learn respect. Like in the military, I learned respect, and I learned to make sure things were done right, completely, and I learned that when I got done with it, somebody would usually praise me for it, and that was valuable to me. I knew that.
That's cool. That's really good.
Yep.
That's cool. That's good.
Very good.
I feel good. Anything else? You got any other questions? You want to say anything else?
I'm done.
You done?
I'm done.
That was longer than
I'm
you
done.
wanted. No, that was great.
But let me give you one,
Yeah.
both of you guys, one more lesson, okay? you're at an important age right now, 30s. You either have or starting your own relationships and families, and establish the right kind of rules and the right kind of expectations with your spouse, with your kids, girlfriend, whoever, so that that sets an example for other people to watch and to follow. And they'll make you proud, and then you can make them proud along the way. So that's important.
That's good. That's good. Model what you model. Is
Well,
what they're going to do.
it isn't
Probably.
necessarily
Not
what
exactly.
you model.
Yeah.
It's what your expectation is, and the fact that they understand what that expectation is.
That's cool.
Yep.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah,